days till Santa Claus comes. Yes, look at Pat. She's got on her holiday earrings. Oh God, 'tis the season.
Hanukkah Harry comes the same day
Really,
on Christmas Eve.
really is that's kind of odd, isn't it?
It happens once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while.
Hmm.
Are you ready for the big one? Are you ready for the holiday?
It's only what it is because of Christmas. Sorry.
That's the reason why we sweat
I'm
it
just
out.
going to blame all the Christmas people for the Hanukkah gifts.
Oh, too fun. And it is 9 o'clock in the morning, but we're going to go ahead and run a real town council meeting and a GID board meeting this morning. So this is the GID agenda. We have 3 items on agenda. Well, there's really 2. One is a resolution regarding the property taxes, and the other is the approval of the GID meeting we recently had on November the 14th. With that, Rhonda, you want to do roll call for GID?
Butler,
Here.
Circus, Mattson,
Here.
Shank,
Here.
Good.
Here.
Okie dokie. The first item on the agenda is resolution number 3, series of 2016. This is a resolution levying general property taxes for the year 2017 as opposed to what's on the agenda of 2014 for general operating expenses of Snowmass Village GID for the town of Snowmass Village for the budget year 2016. Mary Ann?
These are the mill levies required in order to meet the property tax dollars that are currently in the 2017 adopted budget for the GID. And the town must certify these mill levies to Picken County by December 15th. And the GID is at 6 mills, which is the same mills as we had last year.
Okay. Any questions for Mary Ann? Yeah, just a second. I'm going to move for a motion and I'll take comments, yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. With that, I'll take comments now.
Bear with me, I seem to have a lack of oxygen this morning.
Would you just get into Dodge?
Have been under the weather. I
Oh.
imported a cold from our neighbors from Thanksgiving. Can you move the microphone a little closer? Thank you. Absolutely. For the record, Pat Kiefer, 90 Carriage Way, a reluctant Base Village activist. Before we begin to comment, I'd like to compliment Mary Ann Rakowski's presentation of materials. It's succinct and contains the salient points. We may or may not like the message, but it doesn't mean that we don't appreciate the effort that it took. So thank you, Mary Ann. We'll try to keep emotions under control, no guarantees. But it's difficult when you're staring at what we see as tax to the max mill levies that are unique to Base Village. On my right is Bruce Smith, president of Capitol Peak Lodge Condominium HOA Board, and Bruce will begin.
For the record, for those that don't know me, and I'm not sure that there's anybody in the room that doesn't know me at this point in time, I am Bruce Smith, Capitol Peak home owner from day one, okay, 110 Carriage Way. Base Village continues to be a mess of extra taxes and fees without commensurate representation. The Capitol Peak Board has asked retired board member Pat Kiefer to act as our liaison in these matters. So when you see her, know that she has the backing of all the residential board members. Capitol Peak owners provide more GID income from privately owned properties than any other group in the Base Village. As such, we invited the GID chair to speak at our annual owners meeting on December 5th. The GID chair was unable to attend. Neither did any of the other 4 GID board members or any of the 3 advisory board GID members. Other groups we invited to our annual meeting sent representation, but not GID. I'm here to tell you it's not okay to ignore your taxpayers. The base village, to include this GID, has been built using special tax districts. Although TOSV's town council authorized these special tax districts to include the resultant intergovernmental agreement, unfortunately, we, as BV residential owners, have no say or representation in these districts. Remember, BV residential property owners pay taxes at the rate of 211% versus all other TOSV property owners that pay property taxes at the rate of 100%. This is not the first time I made this comment. You want our money, but apparently do not want us to be represented. Taxation without representation has never been right, not when our country was founded, and certainly not now. I find it personally offensive that TOSV continues to treat its guests, property owners, and taxpayers this way. I'll turn it back to Pat.
Thanks, Bruce. In addition to being the liaison for Capitol Peak, I perform that same function for Hayden residential board members and the Viceroy residential board member. So I represent 100% of the Base Village residential board members, as well as many other taxpayers. As was discussed at the last GID meeting, there is zero representation by taxpayers. While Attorney Dresser spoke about why it is legal, it doesn't necessarily make it right. I'm sure England had the legal authority to tax colonists, but that didn't make it right either, and we all know how that turned out. It was residential owner Joe Flynn that found the State of Colorado Local Government Handbook prepared by the Colorado Legislative Staff. Page 45 talks about the differences between a special tax district like Base Village Metro District, which are designed to exist indefinitely, and a general improvement district, which is designed to be temporary. Let me read page 45 pertinent passages. It's pretty short. Improvement districts are formed by municipalities to provide certain amenities like sidewalks. Unlike improvement districts, special districts may exist indefinitely, while improvement districts, my addition, like GID, are typically dissolved once the improvement is complete and any debt incurred is paid off. For example, the improvement districts formed by municipalities provide an amenity in a localized area, and the costs of the improvements are assessed directly against the benefiting property owners. The City Council serves as the governing body of an improvement district, and the district typically dissolves as soon as any debt incurred by the municipality on behalf of the district is paid off, end quote. So with that as the state of Colorado's design for GIDs, Skittles and Snowmelt is built. To the best of our knowledge, GID has no debt and should be dissolved. Right now we see GID as part of the Tax to the Max program. I don't know what's magic about the number of 49.5, but the total of GID and the Metro District totals 49.5, and for some reason folks can't or don't want to exceed that number. Why else would there be a provision in GID to have a mill levy rate of 10, but a governor on it so that it's only 6 at the present time? And the 10 mill levy will be triggered when the bond debt in Metro is paid off. Not because a tax increase is needed, but because the taxes are intended to go down in another Metro district. So what we see is GID operates very well, but it operates just like any other department in the town of Snowmass Village. GID functions should become a regular part of the TOSV budget, and GID should be dissolved. In addition, as I said earlier, the state clearly says the improvement districts provide a particular amenity in a localized area, and the cost of the improvements are assessed directly on the benefiting property owners. That isn't happening here. 250 Base Village property owners are operating facilities that benefit a whole bunch of people. Is it right that only base village is taxed to run Skittles when the other end of Skittles property owners are not taxed to operate it? It seems wrong to us and gives a second reason that the GID should be dissolved. We know that the people sitting in front of us and the people sitting in this room did not create this mess. But we do expect this board to take action to dissolve GID today and not process the paperwork to instruct Pickens County to solely assess 250 base village owners 2017 GID taxes to support facility from which everyone benefits. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I was thinking, I'm often asked the question, I'm sure, I don't usually need a microphone.
But we do because it's being recorded. Because of the recording.
I'm often asked the question,
Identify.
oh, sorry, Joe Flynn, 90 Carriage Way. I'm often asked the question, didn't you know about all of this going in? I guess I understood what it was going to cost to live here and to enjoy this great facilities of the town and the mountain. But I certainly didn't understand the dynamics of the governance and how it worked when you add in the GID, the metros, the Master Association, and all of that good stuff. And I guess as I think about your problem, your issues here, and how you have to deal with what you've been left with from your predecessors, I would also ask you to consider what you need to think about in terms of what you leave behind for your successors in terms of addressing the problems that Pat and Bruce just mentioned. As I think about what we're trying to accomplish here, all of us, in terms of making this a great place to be, I worry that what we're going to end up with is a base village environment that is predicated on the concept that the buyer beware. And how in the heck are people who now start to understand how this is going to operate, how are they going to think about their investment in this village? I hope you'd consider that as you think about how to move forward from the ideal of we will build it and they will come, but the question will be, will they come if they understand all of these issues that are behind the scenes and don't necessarily get disclosed when you actually buy into the base village? Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you all. It is an issue, and I just wish we had a path forward, and perhaps in the future we might be able to look at it as we move through a new ownership structure. And the essence of that purchase is we don't have any of that information, or me, and I don't think any of our various town council members know all the natures of the deal. It's been on our minds. We continue to look at it. We continue to think about it. And the ability to solve any of that issue right now is kind of out there. Not that we're not interested in trying to find some resolution at some point. Tom?
Mr. Flynn and Pat and Bruce, you talked about dissolving the GID. I don't know. Is that something that the town of Snowmass Village can do and absorb, Clint?
I mean, you could, certainly. It's illegal. That would be your prerogative. I mean, I would defer to John on how and whatnot.
And
But
by dissolving it, we would dissolve also the debt that they were referring to, and then the cost of running the Skittles and running the snow melt would be absorbed by the town. I'm not sure how.
Taxpayers.
I assume that's what. So there's no debt with the GID right now, but that ongoing, roughly, I'm blanking my number here for a second. I just blanked my number, how much the GID brings
There's
in.
about 340,000
Yeah.
for 2017.
Of revenue, I mean, of expenses and whatnot, that I think what they're fundamentally asking is, please take this $340,000 of expenses and spread it around the entire community. And I'm putting words in their mouth, but that's how I heard their request. I think that's a fine request from folks that live in the district. I think there's a little bit of history that sometimes gets skipped over, and this is not going to be news to anybody that spoke this morning because we've talked about this on a variety of ways. And when they talk about, taxation without representation, I oftentimes talk about, one person, one vote, and you get to vote. And if you live in the village, you get to vote. And but for the GID and the metro districts, these properties would not exist. But there was a deal struck in the early 2000s to create the metro districts and the GID that created these properties on which they were built. And that was the deal that we're operating from. I think their request, is a fair request. Please continue to evaluate it. Please continue to find equitable ways to resolve it. I think that, part of the budgeting that you guys did this year with the GID to say, is there a more cost-effective way to make a connection between the mall and Base Village? I think that's a step towards that. I think we've heard it. We're going to look to see if there's more cheaper, I shouldn't say cheaper, I'll say more cost-effective way to make that happen. But I think that's a sign that you guys have listened and said, okay, let's investigate. Let's see if there's some proactive steps we can take. So I understand what they're saying. At least I believe I understand what they're saying. But and to answer your question in short, yes, it could happen, but it would take the rest of the community would have to pick up that expense.
My point is that Mr. Flynn made a good point. If you build it, will they come and will they buy? I mean, we all want Base Village to be finished, but we don't want empty rooms. And I mean, I'd like to see in the future. I know this is a simple resolution right now, what we're talking about, but I would like to pursue what their avenues would be.
Well, and I think really what you want to do is, so I think the question that they're saying is, and from the private side is, can the developers, once they build the rooms, can they sell the rooms?
Correct.
And I think it's going to be a discussion then at that point as to the profitability, the business likelihood, all those types of things that the developer's going to have to answer.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see. We've never seen any of the financial modeling of what happens when it's built out.
What we
That's
see
what
is
we
the
gotta see.
physical structure and those types of issues.
Yep.
That's what we approve as a community. As far as their ability to sell, it becomes that business type decision that they've got to put together and say, we can do this. They know going into it what the property is going to be charged property tax wise for sure. And so I got to believe, being sophisticated like they are, that they understand, when they sell these properties, here they are.
And it's not like I want to get pat off our backs, but I mean, I do feel their pain, and I would like to see if there's something we can do, if there was something, not today, of course, but somewhere down the line here, if we could look at another avenue.
I have a question. So Pat quoted the Colorado law saying that special districts may exist indefinitely, but GID is dissolved once improvement is complete and debt is paid off. So if Base Village had been completed by now, yeah,
She used the word typically.
okay, sorry, I missed that, typically.
Understand what that means.
Okay, I understand
It's not the
typically.
outside parameters.
Okay, so if Base Village had been built out by now, would the GID had been dissolved? Was the intention from the beginning to dissolve the GID, or was it going to just exist until the end of time?
The GID is responsible for operations. And so there's the construction part, and then there's the operations part. And as she rightfully points out, there's snow melt operations, and there's operations of the Skittles. That's the responsibility of the GID.
So it was always going to be the GID paying
I
for that?
can't speak specifically to the history, but the way you read it, the way I read it personally is, when it's responsible for operations, unless you want the operations to stop, that yes, it's going to go on forever, as long as those operations continue. Snow melt and Skittles.
That's not necessarily the way it could play out.
Right.
What they're proposing is very much something that would happen. In other words, that function would be over with. But when you get into the public infrastructure that needs to be constructed for a development of this size, and you look at the long history of snowmass in terms of, actually it's Colorado history, boom, bust. When the owners of this property came to the town in the early 2000s with this project, the town was not willing to take the risk of all that infrastructure required for that, for just the reason that we're seeing right now. It's, if you look back at the old documents, the phasing, it's intended to be completely built and occupied at this point.
Right.
And at that point, when there's an understanding that there is a tax base that can support the infrastructure required for that, at that point, the request that was made here today is something that can be revisited.
Right.
But at this point, the GID is under contract with the metro districts to send the 6 mil to them to pay off those bonds and do the operating and maintenance. So there is still an agreement in place that binds the GID. That's not to say that a new agreement couldn't be put in place that would change the obligations. There's no way in good conscience that I could advise you as the GID board here today that that time is now with the uncertainty that is across the street right now. A year from now, that may be addressed, and it could be addressed by the combination of the Metro District and the new joint venture that may or may not own it. We don't know at this time. But 15 years ago, when this project was proposed, the philosophy of the town government at that time was development pays its own way. And that being said, the town wanted this project. Obviously, it was approved, and the town wanted this project, but they weren't willing to take the risk of a sizable amount of infrastructure given the site and the requirements for that site in terms of interacting with transit, parking, transportation, all those things. That's why we are where we are now. And, you know, it's a little different than the situation in England in the 1700s and the United States, in that they were the sovereign. And in this case, the sovereign made a decision, and the taxpayers elected to join those districts by purchasing. So it wasn't at the point of a gun that they had to pay the stamp tax, the T-tax, et cetera, the base village tax, the Metro District tax, the GID tax. So that's where it is right now. And that's really kind of a history lesson in response to Alyssa's question. In response to Tom's question, can those things happen? Yes. Today? No.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a motion on the table and a second. Any further questions or any comments? All in support, say aye.
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 Pose same sign. We're moving on to the approval of the GID minutes for November 14th, 2016. Do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Thank you, Alyssa. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Any corrections? All in support, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving now towards adjournment. Those are the only two items we had. Adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the GID board meeting?
I'll motion to adjourn the GID board meeting.
Thank you, Alyssa. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in support?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you all. Okay, let's move on to Town Council special meeting for December the 12th. It's 9:25. And I'll open it up and see, oops, I'm sorry, we have to do roll call. Rhonda?
Butler,
Here.
Circus, Madsen,
Here.
Shank,
Here.
Good.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have anyone in the public who would like to come forth and make a comment? Yes, Pat, come on up.
First, I appreciate the way Councilmember Good speaks from the heart. I would just as soon be off your backs as well. I would much rather be skiing. For the record, for this meeting, I'm still Pat Kiefer. I still live at 90 Carriage Way. and I'm still a reluctant Base Village activist. On behalf of 100% of the Base Village residential board members for all 3 HOAs and many taxpayers, we are providing more education specifically on Base Village Metro District. Last week, we promised to share why Base Village owners are so surprised by Base Village taxes and what makes up the enormous Base Village Metro debt, so that taxpayers are assessed at 43.5 mills, or 5 times the highest Pitkin County rate on our tax bills. Metro is part of the Tax Max program on Base Village owners, and as Attorney Dresser rightfully pointed out, the developers had to find a way on how to fund the development. A quick reprise: Metro One taxes Base Village commercial properties. Metro One owns and operates the garage, conference, and transit center assets. They have no debt and will lose $400,000 this year, and will take about $250,000 from Metro 2 to help cover those losses. Metro 2 taxes Base Village residential properties. Metro 2 has no assets and carries about $60 to $75 million in debt today. 40% of the total debt is for building the Metro 1 garage, conference, and transit centers. If Metro 1 has these assets, why don't they also own the debt? Fact is, we just don't understand that dynamic. 55% of the total debt is for public facilities such as snow melt roads and replacing bridges. These public facilities were promised by the developer in exchange for massive land use exceptions. It is developer debt and should be owned by the developer and not residential owners. About 6% of the total debt is for storm drains, the walkway to the Viceroy, and that absolutely is a legitimate residential owner expense. So how come 180 normally intelligent consumers are surprised by the Base Village taxes? First of all, we're just not alone in the surprise. The realtor who sold us our condo from Related in 2013 was on the Planning Commission and apologized to us this summer. He said he was surprised at all the taxes and fees and had no idea the developer was shifting their cost to residential owners in the manner that is happening. We shared the GID provision for automatic tax increase when Metro bonds are paid off with the incoming developer last week. They're working very hard to reduce the Metro taxes. They had no idea that when they help us pay off the Metro taxes, bonds rather, that GID has an automatic 4 mil increase. That's what triggers that increase in the GID environment. We have no doubt that councils, even though council's predecessors architected the PUD, that any person in this room can actually articulate with confidence the taxes, fees, representation, and board seat representation that Base Village residential owners experience in GID, Metro, and BVCO. I can now, but it's taken me about 3 years to learn it. Even the full-time employee owners in Capitol Peak don't know about the developer debt in Metro and their voting rights there. Related Craig Monzio actually paid my husband and I a compliment and said, of all the people who purchased from Related, he said we did the most due diligence. With 2 degrees in physics and a pair of MBAs in management and finance, we did try really hard to perform detailed due diligence for our purchase. We even hired a talented local attorney to assist with closing, and still, we're shocked with what we find of the details behind how we're taxed and how we're assessed fees. Even now, the realtors that are selling the Viceroy, the third of the Base Village that has yet to be purchased, after 8 years, they tried to tell us that Metro taxes were one time only and not an annual fee. We tried to educate them as well. So if none of these people know, how are purchasers expected to know about the taxes and the fees? Second point, if these people don't know, go to the web, right? There are no base village tax district websites. If you take your tax bill, there are probably 15 line items on it for you. There are 17 for us. Google Pitkin County and whatever few sets of abbreviated words are on there. Every time you come up with the tax district that is assessing you that mill levy, every single time. Tells you who the board members are, what's included in it, what they're doing, what their goals are, except for the Base Village Metropolitan Tax District. There is no website for them. 43.5 mills, and there's no website. How do you find the information? You have to go to the state of Colorado. GID is incorporated within Town of Snowmass Village, but if you search on Pitkin County GID, you don't have a separate website. It's just recently, actually in the last meeting, that we learned that there was an advisory board, and it's thanks to the way TOSV tries to operate in a transparent environment. So when some town officials and a few local residents say that Base Village should have known the situation that we were buying into, we would respond, how? How would we know? This dovetails into the Metro board seats and elections. Without a website, there's no easy way to learn about openings. Metro meeting minutes were not published until September of this year. So back when they were saying that there were openings that were coming available in May, yep, it was in the paper. And I have to tell you, I read the Snowmass Sun every time it's published. I really enjoy it. But I don't read that fine print that's in the back of the paper after all of the ads. In February, we actually had a taxpayer express interest in running for the BV Metro Board, and he was told that the deadline had passed by 1 day. Now, what we know now, and didn't know at the time, is he could have run as a write-in candidate, but we weren't given that information. In anticipation of related employees leaving the Metro Board, verbally and via email, we requested the self-nomination form from the Metro attorney. 12 weeks later, we still don't have it. When we asked what the process was to backfill vacated board seats, the Metro attorney said there's no process for that. So when people ask why taxpayers are not on the board, it's quite a bit easier said than to get that accomplished. It's the debt restructuring conflict of interest by the debt seller and the buyer's employees on the board, and the board saying grace over taxes which they do not pay, that caused 50% of the electorate to sign a recall petition. The petition has been rejected by the same firm that the Metro attorney is part of. So we've had to hire a litigator to recreate the petition, and we'll get the signatures again. We appreciate that, again, this council did not construct the PID, and the people in this room, thank you, Rhonda, did not construct the PUD. I said PID. And as hard as you all try, there is precedent being set in other communities like San Francisco when a developer has not adequately disclosed to people who purchase their properties. The town of San Francisco is actually suing the developer on that premise alone. Do we want you to sue the developer? Heck no. Suits just delay everything. We want to see Base Village build. What we are suggesting is that when the developer comes to the town for more PUD amendments, that you advocate on behalf of the Base Village residential owners. We thank you for your attention, and I remain a reluctant, but by necessity, Base Village activist. Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Pat. We're looking at now the consent agenda. Any questions on the consent agenda that has the draft agendas and work session topics? And number 2 is a resolution levying general property taxes for year 2017 to help defray the cost of government for the town of Snowmass Village. Do I have any questions on either one of those? Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alyssa. Any discussion? All in support, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are now moving on to, I'm going to go right into administrative reports. Dresser, I think this is one of yours, or Mary Ann. This is the emergency ordinance. If you'd be so kind, because my voice is just going to give out here in about a minute.
Marianne, you want to start, or do you want me?
Go ahead.
Get you some water.
With the current financial markets being historically low, we've requested of our underwriters and bond counsel to explore avenues to save the town money. And you recall that last month we actually, you approved and we closed a refinance of Town Hall. And that's going to save, I think it was no, that's the, it's not going to save that much. Anyway, it's going to save about
$50,000
$75,000 a year. We also looked, and that was, it's kind of fortunate these things have come up because both the COPs that we already did, and this is refinance the town's general obligation bonds on the rec center. They were not callable for 10 years, and they both happen now. Rates are historically low. After discussing this with the underwriters, they felt rather than reissuing bonds, that taking a private placement with a bank to refund these bonds would be the best way to go. In the agenda item summary, you can see the numbers there that will be reducing the rate significantly. Obviously, they have to be a certain level to cover the cost of issuance and make that it would be reasonable to go to all this work to do it. The pricing's been fluctuating a little. We put it out to request for proposals. We got bids back from banks, and we're here to ask you to pass this emergency ordinance, which means it only needs one reading and it takes effect immediately, because the best term sheet we have expires tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Oh.
And so we want to sign that, and we also want to close this because it is a private placement. And this is the sheet of paper I put in front of you, and we'll get to this. This is the town. To qualify for this, we have to represent that we are not going to issue any debt more than $10 million in any 1 year. So the combination, this is where I get back to the 5.9 together with this 2.265 or 2.3 keeps us under the 10 million, which is why we really accelerated the schedule to get it done in December while the rates are low and preserve flexibility for next year and future years if the need arises to issue more debt. So we're getting it all done this year, and that's the representation that we need to include in the ordinance that wasn't originally included. This kind of moved a lot faster once we realized that had to happen, and so that's where we are. So I guess if you have numbers questions, Mary Ann can address those. The language that I gave you would be inserted in section 11 of the ordinance, which is actually just the form of the note where you make that representation that you're not going to issue more than $10 million. And it also appears in the body at section 29 where you make that representation that this issuance of debt does not exceed that $10 million. And what that does is it gets you a better rate because it makes it bank restricted qualified is the nomenclature that allows us to do it at this favorable rate. And this note that you're going to issue is a non-callable note.
Okay.
Maturity is the same date. It's another 10 years. The bank with the most favorable rates offered us 3 different sets of terms, and one of them was or we could call it again in 5 years, and then again, we could call it in 2 years, 19, so little more than 2 years. Yeah, but they were at higher rates, so to maximize the savings, this team made an executive decision to go with that, because in foreseeing the market going low enough in the next 10 years to justify another cost of issuance, all those expenses, we felt that it would have to be such a substantial lowering of the rates that it wouldn't be worth doing it. So this will be a note that's going over 10 years. We did have a little snafu over the weekend. There were a lot of emails going. The underwriters had assumed that our payment accounts for this were already funded, but they're not funded until, this is based on a property tax, so in 17, because the next interest payment is due in April, we would have enough revenue. So a lot of emails flew this weekend, and what we're proposing now, which reduce the savings, not substantially, but incrementally, is to pull that cash out of the first year to pay the cost of issuance, amortize that over the next 10 years it will reduce the savings a little bit over that 10-year period. But it still comes out to be right around $30,000 per year. Now, here's the big caveat. That is that will end up being a reduction in the mill levy to property taxpayers. That is not a general fund amount. That is, unlike the COP, that money saved stays in the town's coffers. This is something that future taxpayers just will not pay. So I don't know, Clint came up with a pretty small number in terms of mill. I think it was between
It's .06.
0.06 of a mill. So,
But,
But
and so we started with that evaluation, just like you did in that matter. But we said, you know what, it's better than nothing. It's worth the time, the work is done, it's worthwhile proceeding
Yeah,
at
it
this
is.
point.
So on page 43 of 54, and that's in the red print, and 31 of 42 on I legislate, we have a varying interest rate on this maturity and escrow. Marianne, is there a reason behind that and why it's not 4.75?
I don't think I have the same, what is the,
It's the escrow agreement, series of 2016. It's
the
on,
escrow agreement is based on, they have to take the monies that we're refunding, and then they have to invest it to make sure that they have enough money to
Okay.
pay off the bonds. So it's a varying interest rate to make sure that they have enough money set aside.
got it, okay.
And I think the one thing too that we should probably point out is, once the ordinance is passed, that allows us to move forward with the term sheet, but if between now and tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we don't all agree on all of the terms in the term sheet, we could just say, we're not gonna go through with it.
Well, I think it's too good to pass up, and I know you guys have worked hard all weekend.
not all weekend.
I did.
But to Mary Ann's point, we're gonna continue to evaluate.
Okay.
What this is asking for is permission to move forward, assuming tomorrow when the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed and the evaluation says it's worth it, we'll execute. If the numbers don't crunch, then we'll say, thanks for the effort, but we won't execute.
Okay. Do I have a motion for
Well,
approval? Oh, is there any
Okay,
questions?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask for a motion for approval, then,
And we'll amend
yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 8
as an emergency.
as an
order.
emergency.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Bill.
And now I would ask that you would amend section 11 and section 29 with the language that's in front of you, which is the town does not expect to issue more than $10 million worth of tax exempt obligation during the calendar year 2016.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept that change into this ordinance?
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. So with the modification to the emergency ordinance number 8, series of 2016,
As an emergency.
as emergency ordinance, I think I
First,
see.
you want to call the question on the amendment.
Okay,
You had a motion and a second.
yeah,
So you call the question on the amendment.
I thought I did. I didn't?
You got a first and a second, you gotta
Oh.
vote. All in favor of the amendment?
Oh, all in favor of the amendment, well, yeah. Okay, all in favor of the amendment.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, let's move on to emergency ordinance number 8, series of 2016, and this is an ordinance designated by the short title 2016 refunding note ordinance authorizing the town of Snowmass Village to contract an indebtedness of it on its behalf and upon its credit by the issuance of its general obligation refunding note, series 2016, in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed 2.265 thousand, and the purpose of refunding the town's outstanding general obligation bond series of 2006, providing details concerning the note, its form, sale, and funds relating thereto, providing for the levy of general ad valorem taxes to pay the principal and interest on the note, for the payment of costs associated with the transaction, and authorizing and approving the taking of all other actions necessary or appropriate for the consummation of the transactions contemplated by the ordinance, ratifying action heretofore taken in relating to such note and declaring an emergency. An emergency. So, that's a long way to say refinancing of the rec center. Okay, all in support, say aye.
She had to do a roll call.
Let's do
Oh,
a
I'm
roll
sorry,
call.
this is roll call. It is an ordinance.
Butler,
Yeah.
Circus, Mattson,
Yes.
Shank,
Yes.
and Good.
Yes.
4-0.
Thank you very much, and thank you guys for all your hard work. Okay, I'm looking at our clock. I've got it at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to take off shortly. Do I have any reports, any actions?
Ma'am.
Nothing?
Can I say two things?
Alyssa, anything?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Is there or is there not an outdoor smoking ban?
There is.
Okay, so can someone then explain to me, because I noticed this yesterday when I was ambassadoring, why in the mall there are those black smoking containers all over the mall?
I would like to send you the terms of the smoking ban,
Okay.
because you're not allowed to smoke within a certain number of feet of a doorway, and you're not allowed to smoke in places where people gather. So it's not an absolute, you can't smoke outdoors in town, okay? It's to, like, food service lines, lift
Bus stop.
lines, bus stops, people, places where people
Gather.
gather.
Okay. Well, those black things are very close to lots of doorways.
They're supposed to be 15 feet at a minimum by state law.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
It was just something I observed yesterday. I also observed, and the town may or may not have anything to do with this, but that there is a lot of Christmas things going on, but not anything representing Hanukkah, and given that Hanukkah falls on Christmas and there's going to be lots of tourists, it would be nice to see something representative in the Hanukkah realm. Just saying. Just going to state that for the record.
Talk to the owners of,
I mean, I know we don't own them all.
yeah, we don't.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, you know.
I'll grab you after, I can ask some questions.
We usually put a menorah up there.
I didn't see one unless I
Used to
missed
be
it.
a silver menorah up there.
The town did that?
No, it was
Oh,
part of Base
yeah,
Village
now's it.
ownership. Okay, Billy, have anything?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, do I have a motion for adjournment?
A motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you very much, Tom. All support? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Have fun. Where you guys going? Oh, that'll be 4 days?
4 days.
Okay, thank you very much. It's pretty red.
Wish I was going to the beach. Maybe 4.
But you know, it'll be good just to get out of Dodge.
We haven't been away since